Today I'm going to challenge myself to do a fashion shoot at only 15 millimeters. Hey everybody, Lindsay Adler here. When I go on location, I gravitate towards the same lenses over and over again, probably many of the same ones that you would choose. For example, when I'm out on location, I reach for a 50 1.2, an 85 1.2. If I want more flexibility, maybe a 24 to 70 2.8. But one of the lenses that I use less often is the one that I shot today. This is the Canon RF 15 to 35 millimeter 2.8. Now, for today's challenge, I made myself shoot with this lens, an entire fashion shoot, only at 15 millimeters. So why is that such a challenge? Well, the lenses that I talked about before, they have narrow depth of field, really wide apertures, and so I can blur out the background if there are any distractions. Or I could choose a longer lens, maybe an 85, or I could shoot with a 70 to 200 and eliminate the field of view in the background. And so it allows me to simplify things. But you're not doing that at 15 millimeters. At 15 millimeters, you are going to see everything. You see the entire background. Even at 2.8, there's a lot of depth of field, so you need to be really particular with your compositions and with what is in the background. And so that was my big challenge today. All right, so first of all, to make the backgrounds more interesting, especially since I know that it's going to exaggerate perspective, I looked around for where I could find one-point perspectives. So roads or alleyways, anything where the buildings were narrowing in on the subject. Because there are so many different elements in the background, if I choose that one-point perspective, everything, all of the lines are pointing in toward my subject, so even if there's a lot going on, I still know where to look. Another thing that I discovered about shooting with such a wide focal length is that it really helps to get down low. I'm talking about sitting on the floor, even if it is dirty New York City streets. Sitting on the floor helped me a lot. One of the reasons it did is it helped eliminate a lot of the background distractions. I could point up and get more of the buildings or the sky behind my subject. In fact, for some of the shots, I stood her up on a ledge so I could shoot against the clean sky or some of the buildings and monuments in the background. This made for really unusual perspectives. Now, one of the things you may have noticed already is how important the styling is. Now, if you know anything about wider focal length lens, you know that it exaggerates perspective. So if I put my hand closer to the camera when I'm using a wide angle lens, that hand is going to look huge. And if the head is further away, it's going to look really small. And so in this example, you'll notice that I have the model in a very big full dress. This was absolutely on purpose, because if I'm low and wide and very close to that subject and she's moving the dress around really dramatically, well, it's not going to distort the dress, but instead it'll make it look fuller. It'll make it look even more dramatic. So styling plays into how I use this focal length. You'll notice in some of the shots, I even got really, really low so that my camera was almost on the ground, and I flipped out the screen so that I could watch the movements without having to lay my chest on the ground and get that really dramatic angle. What was nice is I could have the cobblestones leading up to her in the foreground. This allows the bottom of the frame to be dramatic, but then reduce the amount of distortion on the subject because she is more centered in the frame. Anytime there's an element, an arm, a head, a dress, towards the edges of the frame with a wider focal length, that is when you're going to have the most distortion to the shot. It's going to make things look larger and almost streaked. So trying to keep things a little bit more centered, like the face, is going to be more flattering for my subject. Now, for a couple of shots, I even broke some major rules and took that 15 millimeters for some close-up shots, very close to the subject. Now, when I did this, the distortion was definitely noticeable, and that's why I tried to keep the subject a little bit more centered towards the frame so it wouldn't be quite as exaggerated. Now, the shots, while they weren't necessarily perfect when it came to distortion, I definitely think they were usable and made for something a little bit more dramatic, unexpected. In fact, several of my favorite fashion photographers will regularly shoot a wide-angle lens really close to the subject to create something that's a little bit uncomfortable. All right, so what did I learn by doing an entire fashion shoot at 15 millimeters? My first suggestion for you is pay attention to the backgrounds and perhaps consider looking for one-point perspective so that all the lines lead up to your subject. I also recommend trying to get to a lower angle. Maybe that'll clean up the environment or give you something more dramatic behind your subject. And then lastly, styling matters. Consider using that distortion created by a wide-angle lens to make the clothing look even more dramatic. It'll take the poses in the subject, make them look powerful, and give you something that is unexpected. So if you'd like to see the gear used in the making of these images, be sure to check out the links in the description below, and of course, visit Adorama.com. If you like these videos and you want to see more of me shooting on location in the studio, talking about posing, lighting, and creativity, be sure to like and subscribe. See you next time, guys.